Good day. President Zelensky of Ukraine is a worried man, and he has reason to be. He's worried because President Putin and the Russian military have stepped up bombing of Ukraine. They've stepped up action against Ukraine following the very euphoric success enjoyed by Ukraine in Operation Spiderweb. Ukraine, through subterfuge and through a well-planned and coordinated Secret Service operation, took out a lot of the bombers of the Russian strategic defense triad, nuclear triad. And since then, the Russians have changed course, stepped up bombing of Ukraine, and focused particularly on the city of Kyiv. Last night, Russia launched the largest attack on Kyiv and took out several targets all across the very well fortified city, because Kyiv has been the place where Russia has spared showing its wrath on the city, because that city has historical significance to Russia. But not anymore. Gloves off. Russia in recent days has been raining drones and missiles, Iskander missiles, Zircon missiles, hypersonic missiles on the very beautiful city of Kyiv. And there's nobody to help the Ukrainians. Before now, Ukrainians were always sure that they were going to get help from the American president. But this current American president, President Donald Trump, is not interested in what's going on in Ukraine. And I dare say is exacting revenge on Ukraine for the intransigence and the actions of Zelensky and some of his supporters in Trump's 45th presidency. Good day and welcome to my channel, Ibima Amungo's Perspective on Global Affairs. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe. And if anything I say or the ideas I express resonate with you, please like and share. Leave your response in the comment section. There is a quote in the Bible, if you're a Christian, that says, "And a Pharaoh came that did not know Joseph." It just shows the fortunes of people with changing government. This Pharaoh that does not know Joseph happens to be President Donald Trump. President Donald Trump has really shifted the gears for Ukraine, military support and financial support for Ukraine from the Americans to reverse. In fact, in his 2026 budget, for a budget which is being pushed through Congress as a big, beautiful bill, President Trump does not have any allocation for Ukraine. And since he doesn't want to spend any money for Ukraine, what did he do? He has come up with a very fine framework of peace for Ukraine. He says Ukraine should try and make peace with Russia, but that besides that peace, he will not give Ukraine any more money. This is a sad situation. And Zelensky took action yesterday. He ran to Ukraine, he ran to Canada to meet with President Trump and argue a case that, please, if you can't just give us some more weapons, we will buy them, we will pay for them. And while you're at it, you can also help us in sanctioning, putting more sanctions on Russia. But President Trump has said repeatedly that he has no inkling of sanctioning Russia. So in not wanting to meet with President Zelensky, what did President Trump do? He quickly rounded up his affairs in Canada and left the G7 meeting where he had already upbraided the whole G7 members for kicking out Russia from the G8. So here's the thing. Once again, Ukraine's fate is now lies in the hands of an American president. This journey to destruction that Ukraine finds itself in now was started first has involved four American presidents, if I dare say. The first being President George Bush, who promised Ukrainians to be part of NATO. He proposed and he tried to make Ukraine a part of NATO. And since that idea of joining NATO came up, some Ukrainian politicians, particularly those in the western part of Ukraine, found it attractive as they also wanted to be part of the European Union and NATO and get the coverage that Poland and other East European countries had got following the fall of the Soviet Union. But for Russia, that Ukraine joining NATO will mean that NATO equipment will be right by their border, and Ukraine was not going to join NATO in their reckoning. In fact, it had been said by the former CIA boss then, Bill Bonds, who was a diplomat in Ukraine, in Russia, that they had told him that "niet" meant "niet." Ukraine was never going to join NATO. That was a Russian red line. This NATO matter has continued for a while. And under Obama, with all his rhetoric and all his euphoric discussions and talk about liberty and freedom and everything, he inspired a lot of revolution around the world. There was revolution in Libya that led to the destruction of Libya, revolution in Egypt that led to coup in Egypt and replacement of Mubarak. There was also revolution in Syria that led ultimately to the destruction of Syria. And there was revolution in Ukraine. President Obama was a good talker whose talk ultimately led to the destruction of a lot of things. That is the subject of another video for another day. But how it impacted Ukraine was that Ukraine lost Crimea because there was demonstrations, there was a color revolution, and ultimately there was a coup that replaced a Russian-leaning president in Ukraine. And the Russians acted fast and took Crimea because the port of Sevastopol had been, for several years, the port of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. And they just didn't want that to fall into the hands of a NATO-friendly government. Later on, the Russians quickly organized a referendum, and the people of Crimea, who have always been more Russian anyway, voted to join Russia. Then we had the presidency of Trump. He really didn't take much action, but it has emerged that he helped to train the Ukrainian army even when he was president, 45th president, and he gave them javelin when they started a war against the rebellious eastern part of Ukraine. He gave them weapon systems that they used, and he also brags about it, that he gave them weapon systems and he trained them and he expanded the CIA operations within Ukraine that that trained the special services of the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian intelligence. But beyond the fact that there was a time when election came and he wanted Ukraine to, then a new president who ironically had voted that he will find peace in the eastern region. He wanted Zelensky to help give him some documents regarding Biden's involvement in Ukraine. But that didn't happen. What did he do? Rather, a Ukrainian went and reported President Trump that he was pressuring Zelensky, a member of the National Security Council. And that was used by the Democratic Party then that controlled the House against Trump. And then what did we see? Trump was impeached. That was his first impeachment. Ultimately, Biden won the 2020 elections, and Biden had a long history of anger and animosity towards Putin. And despite all the moves to get peace between the Ukrainian government and the people in the East Donbass region, Biden prompted and urged and told the Ukrainians that he was going to support them in any kind of battle or fight they had with the Russians. Ultimately, Biden insisted that that Ukraine had the right to join NATO. It was not in Russia's place to influence Ukraine's sovereignty and sovereign decision making, and he dared the Russians to do whatever they wanted to do. The Russians did what they felt was necessary to do, and they invaded Ukraine. First, they tried to take Kyiv. That failed, and then they just focused on the special military operation on the eastern part of it. Since then, Biden has become the third American president that has impacted Ukraine. Biden's rhetoric was that we will support Ukraine as long as it takes. We will destroy the Russian economy. And he did help in trying to destroy the Russian economy through sanctions, through kicking them out of SWIFT, through a whole suite of actions that affected trade, disrupted trade for the Russians, disrupted their financial system, disrupted their banking systems. But somehow, the Russians were resilient, and they have, after 4 years, today their manufacturing is back. They are stronger militarily. They have found workarounds against the trade in selling their oil, and they've also found a way to trade with the world using their own currency and also the Chinese currency. But this is what happened under the Biden presidency. Ukraine lost 4 regions. 4 oblasts were lost, and they are now occupied by the Russians. Now there's a new American president who has come to determine the fate again of Ukraine. And this is Donald Trump. In his 47th presidency, now seeking revenge for what they have done to them. But you see, Ukraine has a lot of supporters. There are a lot of support. Ukraine lobby in America is very strong. And Ukraine also has supporters because the hatred for Russia has been channeled through the Ukrainian. European countries like Germany, who lost the war to the Russians and have a grudge against the Russians. Countries like France, who also lost the war through Napoleon and lost the war to the Russians, have a large population of former Russian immigrants, and there's a lot of Russophobia in their communities. And the British, who always plays games of hegemony and holding off regional power brokers. They're all channeled their energy and put Ukrainian support and decided that they're going to support the Ukrainians in fighting the war against the Russians. Well, as it turns out, the Russians say it's a very bad thing for them to be doing because they want the Ukrainians to fight to the last Ukrainian on their behalf. Rather than come and put their own bodies and put their own people, they are fighting Russia through the proxy of Ukraine. The Russians have been crushing them. And the Russians held up Ukraine, beaten up Ukraine, bruised Ukraine. And today Ukraine has not only lost 4 oblasts, they are also losing territory in Sumy, and now we have a situation where the Russians are threatening to take Odessa. They are ramping up their campaign in Ukraine, and it's just a bad time. And it's at this same time another American president has come to seal their fate. Donald Trump is now seeking revenge and telling Ukraine that they should go make peace with Russia. A country that holds something against them, a country that says that these are our terms. 1, you will only have 50,000 soldiers. 2, you will demilitarize. 3, you will denazify. 4, you will never make any attempt to join NATO. Russia has put some maximalist conditions for Ukraine that Ukraine finds unpalatable, and they feel that it is ultimatum and that it is capitulation, that Russia wants them to capitulate in effect. So the backers of of Ukraine, like the European countries, are still urging Ukraine to continue the war. But it's becoming very clear that without America backstop, without American support, without American involvement in this war anymore, the Europeans just don't have the means, the power, the resources to continue with the war. And at this very time that some weapon systems should be still coming to Ukraine, Donald Trump has pivoted to the Middle East and is looking at joining the fray between Iran and Israel so that he can deal a blow against Iran. He has found a new war front for America to open up. And that simply is giving a lot of unhappiness to Zelensky. Zelensky has said that, okay, we will buy the weapons from you. We will collect money from the Europeans. The Europeans have already sequestered a large part of their sanction and seized Russian assets, $300 billion of it. They are taking off the interest from it because that money is in Euroclear. It's held up in the European banking system or trading system in Belgium. So they are taking off the interest and they're giving it to Ukraine, and we can buy these weapons. But these weapons are not even available for the Americans, and they're not available for the Ukrainians, and no least. So Ukraine is in a bad situation. Every day we hear of more missiles landing on Kyiv, landing on the other cities, Kharkiv, Odessa. We now see brazenly that the Russians are now identifying all the European trainers, military advisors, and blowing them off in their dormitories, in the places they are hiding, in their hotels. The Iskander missiles and the Zekon missiles have shown themselves to be way ahead anything that the American defense system, the IRIS-T German systems, all the systems the West have sent to try and help Ukraine have been falling short very seriously against the Russian missiles and drones and missile and the barrage and anger with which the Russians are pouring this thing down on Ukraine. Ukraine is being destroyed. So, like the famed academic John Mearsheimer said, that Ukraine should not be allowed to join NATO because Americans were leading Ukraine up the primrose path. It seems like that prediction he made so many years ago has come true. Ukraine has not only been deceived by 4 American presidents, they are now finally, one other American president is exerting his revenge on Ukraine. And Ukraine is being battered, bruised, destroyed. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. Because even as we are seeing this war going on now, we all know that one country is not putting on its hand on the lever. If this war goes anywhere near trying to favor Ukraine, and China and Russia want to put this war on a conventional note, then China will throw its vast resources behind the Russians, covertly or overtly. But that has not been the case yet now. Russia is getting overtly its support and help from the North Koreans. It also was getting support and help from the Iranians. Now the Iranians are entangled and embroiled in another conflict of their own. So, of course, the Russians will be thinking about how they too will be deploying some form of help to the Iranians should that war against Israel escalate. But since the great moments and euphoria and happiness of Operation Spiderweb, Ukraine is having punched their black eye, beaten, bruised, bombs, missiles, everything. It's not easy for Zelensky. Zelensky is having a bad time. And Zelensky has led his people to destruction. This is a president who came and was elected under the banner of making peace with Russia. He was urged by Biden not to make peace. He was told and prompted by Boris Johnson to tear up a negotiation they had in Istanbul, and he was told by Russia, by the Biden administration, that they will support him until, no matter what it takes. But the Trump administration, a pharaoh that does not know Joseph, is now saying, go and make peace with the person that is beating you and is telling you that you must accept all of our conditions. And this is where I come to the end of my video for today. If you have your opinion about what I've just expressed, please put it in the comment section. I worry for Ukraine. It's not like we like what is going on here now, but we know the role and that human beings in the name of presidents play. Because let's not forget that presidents are still human beings. They are still ruled by those human emotions: anger, hate, hatred, revenge. And they are the ones, when they hold the authority to lead countries, they sometimes lead countries into war, or they all sometimes lead countries into bad decisions. So please, if you like what I've said, or you have your own opinion about today's video, please leave them in the comment section. And if you like it, smash the like button and share. Thank you. Until I see you in my next video.